Are we running out of resources? Trend 3. That's this graph.
So just remember that green, orange, and blue line, because I will describe them one by one. So this is the only datum or set of data which I produced myself together with a co-author, Gail Pooley from Hawaii. And what it shows is the average price of 50 most important natural resources between 1980 and 2018. And what we found, as you would expect, is they increased in nominal price. Nominal price is unadjusted for inflation. As everybody know or should know, currency becomes less valuable every year because more of it is printed. So in terms of nominal dollars, the 50 commodities have become more expensive over the last 40 years. Once you adjust the cost of commodities, and I'm talking about oil, gas, chicken, beef, lumber, shrimp, oranges, whatever. Once you account for inflation, that was the orange line, what you see is actually that natural resources are much cheaper today than they were in 1980. The final line is the blue line. The blue line is what I call the time price. Time price is really it's a better price than real or inflation-adjusted price because it also takes into account wages. As you know, wages tend to increase above inflation because people become more productive. So if inflation in the United States is 2%, a typical increase will be maybe about 3% because people have become more productive over the course of the year. So once you start comparing prices of resources relative to wages, what you see that they have fallen even more. And why is this counterintuitive? They fell by about 70% in terms of time prices. All the while,
and that's from 1980 to 2016.
Or 16 or 18, one of
18. Okay, so
18,
despite more people, despite more urbanization, despite the hypothetically decreasing prevalence of resources, despite all of those hypothetical problems, there's been a 70% decline in basic global commodity prices adjusted for wages from 1980 till 2018. Stunning, right? Not what anyone was predicting in the 1960s by any stretch of the imagination.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So even though the population of the world has increased by something like 70%, the prices of natural resources have declined by 70%, which means that every additional person born on the planet has made things cheaper for us by about 1%. And nobody saw that coming.
Right, that should be said 50 times. Right, because it's so not what anyone thinks. More people means more wealth.
That's exactly right. And that's
I've also seen that more people means more ecological preservation, and so does more wealth, because richer people care more about the environment. And so you see that perverse occurrence too, that once GDP gets to the point where people aren't scrabbling around trying to stay alive, so maybe $5,000 per capita, all of a sudden environmental concerns start to manifest themselves. And so it looks like we could have more people and make them richer faster, and that would be better for the planet.
No, that's absolutely right. The cleanest environment in the world is in advanced countries, in Western capital societies. When you see tremendous attack on the environment is in poor countries. When the Venezuelan economy collapsed, they started eating animals in zoo. In Zimbabwe, when their economy collapsed, they started slaughtering the wildlife. If it's a choice between killing a giraffe or having my baby die, I know what I have to do, right? But so for the longest time, people thought that if population grows, we are going to run out of resources. And this is not what has happened. We have more resources. Resources are cheaper, but that in itself is an indication that they are more abundant than before. Because, of course, human beings are not just consumers of resources. We're not just destroyers of resources. We're also creators of resources. Human beings are producers of ideas.
Yes, and on average, we produce more than we consume. Otherwise, we would die.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's what people like Thomas Malthus or Paul Ehrlich at Stanford University were worried about. They freaked out two generations of people. Ehrlich's population
And
bomb.
we still haven't recovered from that.
No, we still haven't recovered from that.
Apocalyptic narrative. No one believes, if I tell my students we're going to peak at 9 billion and we can handle that and then the population is going to decline, no one believes that. If you say that, well, we've got richer as more people have been born rather than poorer because brain power exceeds consumption, essentially, especially as people have got healthier and their IQ has increased, which is something we could talk about as well. None of this is part of the general apocalyptic narrative.
No, not only can we get access to new resources, but also we can replace resources which are becoming scarce. So, for example, humans used to make candles out of spermaceti, which is this weird sort of stuff in the brains of the whales. Oil or fat in the brains of the whales. So we used to murder them by the thousands, and we used to scrape out that spermaceti and build it into nice candles. And then we realized that we didn't have to do that it was actually quite expensive and quite stupid because we could produce electricity by burning coal. And then we decided that we can switch from coal to gas and maybe eventually to nuclear and whatever. And so that's how humanity manages to constantly produce more. It's through innovation. And in fact, in Western countries today, we have reached peak stuff. This is a book, very important book, which I recommend to your readers, by Andrew McAfee, and that is Making More from Less, or More from Less. Now, what it means really is that even though the American economy and the British economy continue to grow and produce more GDP per capita in absolute terms, the amount of resources that go into it, be it aluminum or whatever, that has actually peaked off about 10 or 20 years ago, and it's now declining. So we have become so incredibly productive that we can now use much less resources in order to produce more wealth, more GDP.